absolutely stunned, beyond surprised, but obviously completely thrilled. Yeah, absolutely thrilled. So I'm an immunologist by training, and that means I've studied the body's response to infection and inflammation, both as an academic and obviously during my life leading Novabiotics. And I've been fascinated by the fact that the body's systems that do or don't work, that deal with infection in a way that can mitigate antimicrobial resistance, and systems that have evolved with microbes and really give us a template for designing new drugs that have similar mechanisms of action that can prevent resistance and also mitigate resistance that already might be in place in bacteria. So I guess from studying how the body does respond to infection, that really got me interested in ways that we can design new therapies based on that. And the infections within the airways of CF patients have always been very much on my radar. I think part of that study of why sometimes the body cannot deal with certain microbes, and in the case of CF, just the very unique environment of the CF lung, obviously predisposing that environment to infection, and then thinking of ways that potentially we could circumvent that and come up with therapies that actually will work in that very challenging environment. So I have been interested in, I guess, studying infection and AMR for a good long while, but with the chest infections associated with CF very much being a focus and an indication that I've been very interested in, both as an academic and certainly in Novabiotics. So within Novabiotics, I'm leading development of antimicrobials for CF through our Line of X programs. And we've been developing these for more than a decade. And these are therapies that specifically address the infections in acute exacerbations and more chronic infections in CF. And these are treatments that get around the many challenges of therapies to tackle infection within the unique environment of the CF lung. It's a landscape in terms of new antimicrobials being developed for CF infections that's been far too bleak for far too long. There's been a lack of innovation, a lack of development in this area. Novabiotics has been committed to this, developing our own programs, but through the syndicate, there's a call to arms, if you like. There's such an impact to CF patients of infection still, even in a modulator era. Infection is still such an important factor of this disease and impacts CF patients' lives so much. It's absolutely critical, not just through individual companies, but through the syndicate, that we can push forward, create an environment where there can be more innovation and hopefully more development of these much needed therapies in the future. All of the challenges that I've mentioned in terms of developing new treatments for CF are part of a wider issue, a global crisis that I think we're all aware of in terms of antimicrobial resistance. The infections that CF patients will get either acutely during exacerbations or chronically, and the need for CF patients to take antibiotics long term, pretty much throughout the course of their life, obviously is going to drive resistance, but that's something, the use of antibiotics in CF cannot be avoided. So against this bigger background of the need to develop new drugs overall for infections and tackle drug resistance in infection, it's ultra critical in cystic fibrosis. But because of all the challenges, associated and the uniqueness of the CF lung and developing drugs that work within that, it's so important that there is a resource, a go-to that anybody in this space who's looking to develop therapies can reach out to and be supported along that journey, because it's such a complicated pathway developing any therapy, all the hurdles that you have to get through to demonstrate efficacy, safety, etc. But the uniqueness of developing antimicrobials for CF is such that scientific advice, specific tools for research, resources haven't really been as accessible as they probably should be to anybody researching potential therapies in this area. So the syndicate is so important in terms of our resource to help any company, even academic groups, on the start of their journey to developing new therapies, and in providing all of that advice, resource, and I guess creating a bit of a focal point for this area of research, certainly in the UK and hopefully beyond. And I think the syndicate's at the start of what should be a really exciting and incredibly fulfilling journey in its impact on furthering innovation in this space, and hopefully in the years to come being part of creating some new therapies in this space. So I think what the syndicate's been able to do so far, identifying the key things that anybody developing these kind of treatments actually needs, will hopefully just expand, and will be a go-to in the future for anybody looking to develop antimicrobials for CF patients. So the celebrations, I can definitely say, are still ongoing. I'm not sure when they're supposed to stop, hopefully not for some time to come. But obviously in a COVID era, it's been pretty much virtual, but that's been great. So lots of celebrations with friends and family, etc. And I think as people get to find out who might not know, it means that, that the celebrations weren't just the day that the list was announced, they're still ongoing, which is fantastic. So yeah, I hope they don't just have to stop quite yet. So the best bits about my role, I always say I have the best job in the world anyway, because I absolutely still love the science of how the body fights infection, how we can come up with new therapies to do that. So I love being part of the innovation. But as CEO of Novabiotics, the translational piece, actually converting that science and those ideas into potential therapies, is incredible. And when we've had our therapies in clinical trials, and we know that even though they're still experimental, we've seen some benefit in CF patients, that there is nothing better. That's the kind of thing that, on the worst day, it's very, very challenging, obviously, running a biotech company, but that's the thing that is just amazing. So I think it's that mix of still being involved in the science, but because of what we do as a company and the stage of development of the therapies, seeing those translate into treatments that can then impact patients is incredible. And then I think through the syndicate, being able to use the experience that I have through Novabiotics, and I guess more broadly through my training, to hopefully other people to be able to use that, and that be useful to kind of drive the field forward more broadly. So beyond Novabiotics as well is also fantastic. So I think there are many best bits of my role, but yeah, I would argue very strongly that I've probably got the best job in the world.